Hello, I'm Brad.
And I'm Jason.
You are listening to
Dice in Mind.
We just finished up our series on world building. So you have built your world, whether it's a universe, whether it's a dungeon crawl, whatever the case is, in the context of the game that you are going to take part of or DM or GM. When you get there, now the question becomes, what is you've generated this world, have you made sure that you understand the purpose of the game? One. Is it a dungeon crawl? Are you, in the case of the game that I've built that we still have yet to get back to playing? I know Jason's smiling.
Tick, 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 tick.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Mine is much more vast, and there are stories that take place in a more vast air quote universe.
Well, it's why you called it the vastness.
Yeah,
Right. I mean,
literally, I was so
literally.
original that I called it the vastness. In the context, because never mind, we don't need to go there.
Yeah.
The challenge with being a master, a game master, dungeon master, whatever the case may be, is the creativity involved in that. And this is something you and I have talked about for a long time.
Lots.
And how we both are in worlds that are creative, but not, correct me on this one, not so artistically creative.
Right.
So what this is, the creation, the generation, we're going to talk a bit about randomization.
Mm-hmm.
This allows us to be creative in a different realm than where we work every day.
I think that's one of the allures for both of us of doing this.
Yeah, we wanted to, I think, knowing you as long as I have, and I apologize, folks, I'm going to try not to sniff, but I got the sniffles, not COVID. You've been, and that's not the best way to put it. You had been looking to commit to something more artistically creative for a while. You did some of the writing.
Mm-hmm.
We have one of your stories that's a prior episode, Ohm.
Yep.
You decided to get back into RPGs as a function of this idea.
Yes.
The same thing with me.
Mm-hmm.
So, but you can be creative as much as you want. There are tools and resources out there that may not even sit in the world or the publishing realm of Wizards that can be very, very useful when actually generating the adventure within this world.
And I
built
think
this world, you have to now generate the adventure to keep people interested.
I think guys and gals and others like us at this point in life and with our types of lines of work who, hopefully have to have some novelty, right? Some ability to generate new ideas. It's, I don't know, you tell me if you experience this too, but I think when I'm looking at writing or doing research, sure, I've got my ideas, but the very enterprise of it is that these are all based on what's come before. And so for example, I was running an analysis of a really little study we're collecting data for last night, and I was using a new method. It's new to me. Some others developed it like back in 2015. Well, I think we're being sort of creative by applying it to this area of our study. Okay, but we didn't come up with it. But of course, I wouldn't think anything of that, right? Like Newton said, if I've seen farther than others, it's because I've stood on the shoulders of giants, right? And so like whether it's my work, whether it's your work for analytics, you're not trying to create everything new. You're trying to take the next step.
Yes.
But I know for me, Brad, when it comes to anything quote unquote creative, because I've never considered myself all that creative, and I certainly don't consider myself a quote creative, right? Like someone who actually gets paid to do these things. Then I often feel kind of like a shuckster, like a charlatan, if I don't have any new ideas. And that's exactly the opposite of what you're saying, that it's no different. You don't start from nothing. You don't start sui generis. There are all of these awesome resources out there if only we look for them.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think one of the mistakes I made when I started generating this world is I had an idea that I put to paper.
Right.
And I didn't necessarily fully comprehend or understand the
Mhm.
depth in which I would need to develop to make it a palatable and good experience for you and others who play the game.
Yeah.
So as I started to do that, I'm like, well, how do I, I can, I looked at different ways of, dungeon generation using rolling
Hmm.
dice to create,
Right.
left and right turns in a dungeon, how many monsters are in here. I was looking for ways or tools
Yep.
to create.
Tools.
And I told you from the outset that I could never publish my adventure because I plagiarized, air quote,
Right.
from a
Right.
lot of other material that I grew up reading, not playing, but
Right.
reading. And for those of you that Jason, I know won't read them, but I leverage a lot of material from the Dragonlance Chronicles, which
Right.
I love.
Right. Yeah, maybe as a segue, as an aside, quickly, Brad, I am
Hmm.
looking for something really different and fiction to read. Maybe we'll talk offline about
Yeah,
that.
you're not going to read the Chronicles, dude. You cannot read that, or you can't read the Legends, and I have the
Oh,
books for
because
both
of
of them.
our game.
Yeah,
Okay, moving on.
yeah.
But to your point, what
Actually,
you're
jokes aside,
oh,
you could read them.
okay,
I think it would be a good read, but
okay.
let's keep
Okay,
going.
but to your point, I mean, what you're saying about having felt at the time, like like you and I talked a lot about this in the past, having felt like you were plagiarizing. Again, emphasis on air quotes. No, having relied on the creative ideas that came before you, like Gygax, like Roddenberry, like Lucas, like all of the greats, or so many of them, who we've enjoyed reading or playing. Right there, as Solomon said, as well as Einstein, there are no new ideas under the sun. Only the terms change, right? And that's what we're
Yeah,
talking about.
yeah. When I first started generating ideas for this, when we decided to move from Pathfinder to D&D 5
Yeah,
fifth
yeah.
edition, I went out to grab. There's obviously a lot of materials for PF third party, a lot of materials for
Oh, yeah.
fifth edition, and even earlier that you can leverage in fifth edition. Some of the
Mm-hmm.
first couple books were these small little books. They were like $5 to $6. They were written by Matt Davids, and they give me randomization like the Game Master's Terrain Guide. It gives me ideas about the different areas. Like Jason would laugh. There's a section in here in the terrain guide called the Tree of Life.
Oh, that's cool.
So that's I'll be honest, I'll give it away. That's where the town of Tree came from in our adventure.
It makes sense.
So I looked at these and I started utilizing some of these in some ways because they also have D100 random generators.
Right.
And as simple as that is,
Yeah.
the idea of using, and this I struggled with, and I'd
Mm-hmm.
be curious to hear whenever you are listening to this, folks, if you've encountered this that I did, as I had, when I started using this stuff, even though I had leveraged stuff from the Chronicles, I almost felt like a little bit like I was cheating.
Like you were cheating. Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I finally came to terms with the fact that the stuff in here, he's just putting it in a way that makes it much easier for us to create unique adventures,
Yeah. Right.
whoever it is. So once I started doing that, and we'll get to a little bit more later, I found leveraging material like that as a DM or a
Mm-hmm.
GM.
Mm-hmm.
I think unless you are like, you know, well, let's just leverage it. More creative than me, which leaves a
Well,
lot of the population open.
more practiced than either of us, right? If
Yeah.
you do this all of the time, it's like anything else. You have that experience from which to draw.
You just said time, and that hits a point too. Both of us are very busy.
Yeah.
Both of us have families and
Yeah.
activities and things that revolve around them. Why not use the tools available to you
Yeah.
to create these adventures. You know, I
Hmm.
even talked to Jason about leveraging my and kind of building on my DM experience and just doing a little dungeon crawl and bringing some of our friends who
Yeah, which sounds
haven't
great.
normally played.
Yep.
You know, again, another one of these ideas that I've put down and that I need to execute on. But any way you can leverage this material, it's in many ways, correct me here, it's a textbook isn't the right word anymore. You're utilizing your
No, because
resources.
that makes it sound boring.
Yes, well, that's what I
Right.
wanted to avoid it, but
But these are just wonderful tables. Um I was going to make an analogy to the stats textbooks, but that's not going to help my case. Let me put it in perspective. This is something that I think has helped me reframe how I look at these randomization tables, collections, whatever, right? All of these creative resources. If we take that to extreme or to the extreme, what do we have? We have canned stories. In other words, we have published adventures, some of which are beautifully written and are considered very highly as works of fiction, as works of creative literature. And and I think the typical player, the typical GM would say, hey, that's great if you are going to run a game. Let me give you an example. I am an avid listener to the Glass Cannon podcast. I've been talking to you about this podcast and Brian and some
oh,
of the others for the past, I don't know what it is, 2 or 3 years I've been listening to it.
yep.
They are as we record, they are on episode 297. I think I've been listening since the 70s or 80s, maybe since the hundreds or so. I think before that. Um, I'm not one who's much to listen to real play, actual play podcasts. I don't watch the videos. However, I think this show specifically, they're a whole network now. They seem really great guys, but I think this show particularly is brilliant. This is where you've got these really funny, bright, charismatic guys who are friends, who are like listening to them. I've said this to you before. It's like listening to us when we're hanging around as a group of
Yep.
friends. It's one of the things that motivated me to want to do this podcast and specifically with you. So, Troy and the guys, if you're listening to this, and we know you're not, we're fans. I definitely love the show.
You're going to have to hashtag that now or I'm going to have to hashtag that out
Yeah,
on social
you're
media.
yeah, you will. You're all over. You're all
Yeah.
over the Insta, as Obama calls it.
Yeah.
So, but my point with this is that they are playing the adventure path for Pathfinder called. I just lost it again, having a senior
Giant
moment.
Slayer.
Thank you. They're
Yep.
playing Giant Slayer. They're at the end of book 6. All of their characters are level 16. Here's my point. It's a really well-written story. Now, their GM he's doing a ton of writing on top of it. I know that because they talk about that. But my point is, I think that's really good creativity, really good fiction. And when I listen, I don't for a minute think, oh, they're totally cheating because they're using an adventure path. Now, yes, they are going beyond, but it's no different than like I will sometimes follow the Star Wars subreddit for the RPG. And one of the things that comes up over and over and over is, hey, people, what can you recommend as good adventures to run for my group? Right.
You
And if that's okay, then we can use these other things. That's my
Yeah,
point.
and I was going to ask you. You kind of segued in for me. Um, when you do your Star Wars adventures,
Yeah.
I know you've leveraged other materials. I mean,
To put it
you went
mildly.
out and actually got from FFG, the X-wing game. You actually got first of all the little starships so they could visualize.
I've given those subsequently to my nephews, but yeah, I got a bunch of those, partly because that's a fun game, X-Wing, to play, but also to help, yeah, with visuals. Right.
You know,
I've got a graphic right now that I'm just holding on to until the day when you and I actually have episode 1, because to help make sense of one of the worlds in that episode, I've got a visual. When I GM, at least in Star Wars, I take from everywhere.
That
That
was what I
fits.
wanted. That's what
Yeah,
because you have,
everywhere.
like even Star Trek. You and I both own the technical manuals for the Enterprise D and for DS9. There
Yeah.
are other books out there that aren't RPG related.
The Eagle Moss, the growing Eagle Moss collection of starships, not the ships, the books. They
Yeah.
are brilliant. That we've talked about how that's going to be central to our design so that it helps us stat ships.
Yeah. We don't
Yeah.
have to build anything from scratch. We're
No.
leveraging material
Yeah.
that's even outside of the realm of RPGs.
And that's our point for our listeners, right?
Yeah.
That there are all of these remarkably, wonderfully fun, creative resources, as you would be calling them, that are out there for us. And chances are just about any game you're interested in, and especially any of the major popular RPGs, this stuff exists. I mean, there are entire presses like Cobalt Press, which
Yeah.
exist specifically historically to publish third-party materials to help enrich D&D games. We've talked about this months ago on the podcast, how West End Games based their Star Wars game on the early films, and then the later films used West End Games as a resource for their stuff. So art like any other great creative enterprise, right, including RPGs, it reiterates itself.
Paizo started as the publisher of Dragon Magazine,
Right.
for third edition, and ultimately 3.5, and provided adventure material, and then they stuck with it when when Wizards moved to 4. I look over, and something that we haven't really talked about is with the licensing that D&D had prior to version 4,
Yeah.
3.5 was out there as air quote open domain.
Right.
Publisher Green Ronin came out with
Right.
their True 20, and I actually just took a quick peek, and it looks like they've actually printed they have a revised manual for it.
Amazon, you'll be getting Brad's order tonight.
No, I didn't.
Not
It's
yet.
on print on demand, so it's probably through Drive to RPG. I didn't look
Yeah,
too deeply
right.
because we're in the middle, but they developed their own D20 game system out of that. There's material. They developed Freeport, which is a world that we could leverage if we wanted
Nice.
to within
Nice.
the games. I think you hit it on the head. Creativity comes in many forms.
Yeah.
And leveraging material that's out there does not make one less creative.
Mhm.
It allows for ingenuity,
Mhm.
and it allows, instead of going through and doing a lot of extra work, you can take some of this material, these D100s or these one shots, and we'll talk about that. There's a tome here on my desk that I've used, but you can take that material and leverage it into an adventure. The
Yeah.
Glass Cannon guys are using something like that.
Yeah.
I think it's important, and for those that are listeners that play regularly, this isn't a new topic for you.
Oh,
But
no.
for those that are starting to play, this is material, let's be honest. Before the age of the internet, we'd have to go to the gaming store, and obviously gaming stores were limited in terms of what they could hold in inventory. Any store could only carry so much, and they had to carry the stuff that they knew would sell.
Yep. Yep.
Now, with the age of the internet, a lot of this is, go to Amazon and just look around, and there's a lot of good material out there, and a couple of the ones that I have here, including the ones by Matt Davids, and a couple others, are better for me than maybe others are. But there's a lot of good material.
So on that note, let's go there, because you have a much more extensive library, and honestly, we could just pause right there.
Yeah.
But you have a much more extensive library in terms of these types of resources. You are much better about collecting these and using them than I've ever been. So I know before we started recording today, you were showing me a few of your favorites. What and listeners, we're leading somewhere with this, as we teased last week. Brad, what are some of your favorites? What have you actually found either interesting and or useful?
So I mentioned Matt Davids. I mean, literally, he has a lot of, and these are very, you know, small books. There's one that, 60, 80 pages that talk
Hmm.
about it. There's a lot of material, quests, random tables. I have found those to be helpful.
Yep.
There is I haven't looked at other works, but one of them, this is almost a bit of a giveaway in a way to our adventure, but
Don't worry,
Dr.
I'm
Tim
not listening.
Woods
Uh-huh.
um, has one, random table cities and towns. And
Oh,
I
that's
actually used a
useful.
little bit of this.
Uh-huh.
And here's a good example of creativity. So, wardens, you can actually, in your cities and
Uh-huh.
towns, Dr. Woods talks about wardens. Well, we don't have wardens in our game. I used some of the material from that and some from other places to create arbiters. And Jason will recognize that term because that's a
Yep.
that's a term that's unique to our game. So
Hmm.
those are
Hmm.
just those are two examples that I used earlier on that really have helped me take care and help me to build this world. The other one is, or the other book that I have found that I picked up,
And this
and
is the one you convinced me to pick up. So you and I have been talking about this for a couple months now.
oh yeah, this is a book by Jeff Ashworth called "The Game Master's Book of Random Encounters,"
And it is
and
remarkable.
yeah, and I mean it has eight one-shot adventures that you can play for any level,
Hmm.
a random NPC generator which I have used, and then in effect in one book it has those adventures, the NPC generator, and then D100 tables for lots of things related to curses, dreams, etc. I'm reading from the back
Yeah.
of the book.
And
So
we've both been going through this. And and listeners, I know I just said we've been talking about this for a couple months. And what I mean by that is this book published on September 15th. So it's brand spanking new, but Brad knew this was coming because you can go online and you can see, some excerpts, sample pages, things like that. And so we'd been watching this one, you especially,
yeah,
and you had told me you had pre-ordered it. And I'm like, okay, fine. And then you sent me, I don't remember what it was. I think you sent me some screenshots and it was like, whoa, I don't remember how you convinced me. But as soon as I saw inside the book, it was like, yep, I'm getting this puppy. In fact, when I go to pick up one of my daughters this evening, I might just bring it with me for the car because I think I'm going to have like 10 or 15 minutes to just sit and read. Oh, yeah.
and obviously whenever you're listening to it, prices could all change and everything. But what I
Mhm.
found, what caught my attention is all the material in this book,
Yeah.
and it was cheaper
Oh,
than first party material.
oh,
And
like
not
half the
only
price.
that,
Yeah.
as we are talking now, as we
Hmm.
are talking today,
Yep.
there's another book Jeff is publishing out in October, the
Yep.
Game Master's Book of
Not
NPCs.
non-player characters. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then come May,
May 10.
he's going to have the Game Master's Book of Traps, Puzzles, and Dungeons.
I mean, you can almost hear the money leaving Brad's wallet. Like if you can, you can, if anyone used cash anymore, you would be able to hear that. But you know what I think, what impresses, well, one of the things that impresses me so much about uh Jeff's Game Master's Book of Random Encounters is how accessible it is. Like, compare this to the first edition Dungeons and Dragons, like the AD&D, right?
Yeah.
Of how it's half of the book is tables, and they're just tedious and very off-putting to a lot of people, including potential players, including potential GMs. And then you get to Jeff's book, and the layout and the design, it's just beautiful, and it's so funny. Remember a couple of weeks ago, out of curiosity, I grabbed D100.
Yep.
Well, I grabbed 2D10, and I went to the back and I created, just out of curiosity, I created an NPC because he's got some of that in the back too, because it's so comprehensive. And then I sent you what I created, and your response was like, wow, that's a really good NPC. And that was like 2 minutes of roll. And I kept laughing with every roll because of and I never could have come up with an NPC like that on my own.
I think from my perspective, and we'll be honest, there's a reason we're focusing on this book right now.
There is.
There is.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't even know if we could have like some sort of like music in the background that is mysterious, that drives to the crux of this discussion. But what's that?
I was trying to scare you. It's it's I was being mysterious. Keep going.
Yeah, no, it didn't work.
No.
But point being is that if I were a newer GM,
Mm-hmm.
if I were an experienced GM,
You'd still be comfortable. Yeah.
Having all this material in one book and then looking at the other two coming out.
Oh man.
I could have, if I would have had those, I would have generated the world that we play in so much faster. I mean, I think I even left, I think for you early on, I had left a couple, not voicemails, but
I was going to say, you would text me.
Yeah.
You would text me or message me, and because you're the one who got me starting to do it with you, right?
Yep.
You, in the weeks before we started playing, you would just out of the blue in the evenings, you would send me backstory.
Yep.
Bits and pieces.
And if you are looking to be creative, you don't have to be a creative. You can use a creative's material to be creative. And that's what we really have here. And again, there's a lot of materials out here. What drove me to look at Jeff's book, if I can indulge in just using his first name here, less expensive than first party materials, the depth of which of it's in there. And honestly, even going down to the quality of the book and the binding. I know we're getting real.
No, but we've done this before. It is a beautifully produced, printed, written book. And it's funny. If you read through, even just like I went through and I read like the section introductions. Yeah. And it's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna use this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so again, the other two are on order for October and for May. I like this one. This one sits actually right next to my DM guide. I've mentioned to you, I've used OneNote to track Microsoft OneNote because it's open, it's open and free. I track all of the adventure information in there. I think you use Apple Notes. I have used that. But I've pulled, when I have been documenting, because we haven't played for a while. Granted, we haven't really played for a while, just as a small side note, because we are so busy recording
every week. Right. So, I mean, I think we're both starting to Jones for just a quick session of something. Yeah. But yeah, this definitely makes the need.
Yeah, and I would, if, when I go and sit down and go through and look at my notes, I have the player's handbook, I have the DM guide, and then I have this. I can look up monsters. I know they have a monster manual and so on, and it's great material.
Yeah.
Tasha's.
Oh yeah.
Xanthars, Volos, all of those great material. But I can get monsters and things online, this gives me that type of material.
This is complementary in the best ways.
Yeah.
To the first,
So let me ask a question. Is why do you think Jeff put this together? I mean, it's just literally, what was the onus behind him deciding to put this type of material together in 3 books? I tend to use the word tome when we're talking about gaming books like this.
Yeah, well, because it's a big one.
Yeah. And like I said, folks, it's a big one, but it's this, I mean,
so easy.
It's the same size as the player's handbook.
And it's easier to read.
Yeah.
You know what? I think you pose a really good question. Why don't we ask Jeff? Jeff Ashworth is a writer editor, and storyteller, whose credits include the Game Master's Book of Random Encounters, the Game Master's Book of Non-Player Characters, and the soon-to-be-released The Game Master's Book of Traps, Puzzles, and Dungeons, as well as work for Disney, Hasbro, Nickelodeon, and World Wrestling Entertainment. When he isn't working on special projects for Media Lab Books, he enjoys playing and designing RPGs with his friends. In his role-playing career, he has bested beholders, sweet-talk succubi, and devastated dragons without breaking a sweat. In the real world, after failing a late-night perception check, he was nearly crippled by a foot-piercing D4. He and his wife live in Virginia with their dogs, Zelda and Lincoln. All right. Well, Jeff, thank you so much again for being here. You and Brad and I were just talking for several minutes before we began recording about mutual interests and your background. We've got a bunch more questions for you. Just to set this up for listeners who aren't familiar with your work and creativity beyond what they just heard in your bio and what Brad and I were talking about earlier, you are the author of a very new trifecta of books to be used with D&D 5e. In September, the Game Master's Book of Random Encounters came out. Days ago, as we record this in October, number 2, the Game Master's Book of Non-Player Characters came out. And to my knowledge, still scheduled for May, is number 3, the Game Master's Book of Traps, Puzzles, and Dungeons. And I just want to read something you sent to us, if I might, when we were emailing weeks ago. And I quote, this is what you wrote. The Traps Puzzles book is still a work in progress, and if I die before this interview, that book will be the primary cause. Now, I know you just told us, you're laughing, you just told us that's in production now. So it looks like you made it. But maybe we could start there.
Well, made it thus far.
Yeah.
Sure. I'm currently still alive. God willing, and the creek don't rise, as they say. The thing that I will say is anytime you start a project, you have a sense of what it is, what you want it to be. I have a tendency to overcomplicate things when I let my mind wander a little bit over a project's potential. So, you know, I could make the book this. It could be very straightforward. It could be a group of random spaces with maps and random encounter tables associated with them. And that's what the random encounter book was pitched initially to be. But then I started working on it and I was like, well, you know, what would be really cool is if we had a roll table that could connect random parties together. So, you know, when you're DMing a one shot, nobody knows each other. They don't have party connectivity. So what if there were a roll table that could replicate playing together for years in a matter of moments, and just sort of create these character connections that you hope to have after playing together in a campaign in a short period of time? What would that look like? And how much space do you have to create it in terms of the page count that you have? So I tend to kind of stretch an idea farther than it maybe needs to be, for better or worse, right? Better in theory, that makes the books better. Worse, there are only so many hours in a day. I have a wife whom I love, and I like to spend time with. You know, the content that you create is kind of born in the space that you're willing to sacrifice between those two things. You know, I love a good puzzle. I love a good riddle. I love a good trap. I love a good mystery. Solving, when you watch, I don't know, a Poirot episode or you know, some Agatha Christie story, and you're like, oh, I think I know who did it. But as you watch this perfect clockwork machine kind of reveal itself, you're like, oh, this author is obviously much smarter than I am. Writing trap material, writing puzzle material is it's like learning a foreign language while also trying to write a short story in that language. For me personally, I'm not good at Sudoku, but I, for whatever reason, told the publisher that I could create a book of like 100 Sudoku puzzles for experts. So
Wow.
I'm in this space where it's this race against time of like trying to teach myself the mechanics of proper Sudoku puzzling while at the same time trying to figure out like, okay, all the numbers and rows have to line up. And also the squares. Wait a minute, the squares also have to add up to all the it's just a nightmare. So it's been difficult to do. But it's been fun. Like challenges are fun for me. So
that's really cool. So okay, so this begs the question though, and I know Brad, you and I have been really intrigued by this. So not only are these books fascinating, but just to diverge for a moment, Jeff, you've got a really interesting background too. I mean, how I think we certainly think so. You know, just the little bit that we've been able to read about you and that you've shared of where you started and how you got to D&D, right? I mean,
sure.
Like many things in life, it doesn't seem that this was a straight path.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about your collegiate experience earlier, and you hinted at that it was kind of weird, Brad.
Yeah.
I can only speak for myself, right? I went to college. My expectation was that I would become a United Methodist minister. That was like that was my driving force. That's what I was so certain that that's what I wanted to be. And then like I started studying religion, and for whatever reason, I was like, oh, the more I learn, maybe I don't feel so comfortable leading people. I feel more comfortable asking questions. Like questions made me feel I was just more inquisitive than definitive, I guess. And that led me to exploring different things. I'd always been on the theater side because I was raised in the church. I like sang a lot. I was in church choir. So then I got into musical theater, and I moved to New York because I thought I wanted to be a musical theater performer. When I lived in New York, I learned very quickly, like, oh, you have to also learn how to dance. Like you have to know how to dance if you want to be in musicals. And I didn't know how to dance. I was not good at it. Immediately not good at it. So I kind of pivoted and started doing stand-up. I thought that was maybe a way to scratch this weird itch that I had, which was to communicate with people. I knew I enjoyed making people laugh. I knew that I enjoyed talking to other people. My quote unquote ministry background, like I wanted to teach people. That was an aspect of my personality that I wanted to tap into. So I started doing stand-up, and I did that for a while, and that led to writing as a source of income. I stopped waiting tables and I started writing professionally, and that led to my first professional writing gig, which was at World Wrestling Entertainment. For whatever reason, that's where I ended up. So I started working there for a while. I stopped working there after a car accident because I couldn't travel with the circus every week. And one of my former bosses when I was at WWE had started his own company. It was like a custom publishing company, and hired me on to be his number two. And I've been there ever since. I've been writing for Topics Media Lab and creating content on the licensed publishing side. So through Topics, I've written material for Disney, for Hasbro, for Nickelodeon, on the licensed publishing side. And as we've grown our book business, that's sort of how, as a pastime, I knew I wanted to play D&D because I heard about it. Friends played it when I was a kid. Friends played it. Some friends played Magic the Gathering. A buddy of mine had to give away all of his Magic the Gathering cards because he felt like they had a dark energy about them. And so the Satanic Panic was alive and well in Greenville, South Carolina. So we stopped playing Magic. So I never got into D&D as a kid. But as I as I came to it from the creative side, and started playing as an outlet for creativity, I discovered how many aspects of my personality, how many of the things that I'm personally passionate about, you can really bring to bear at a role-playing table. I love collaborative storytelling. That's probably one of my favorite things to partake in. I enjoy solving puzzles. I enjoy debate, not argument. And I think that the structure of many of these games are positioned in such a way that they allow you to remove yourself personally from a situation because you're embodying a character, but they force you both as an individual and as an individual portraying a character to consider other points of view, to consider rigidity and how a paladin theoretically meant to be very connected to a specific course of action and specific desires. And if their bond conflicts with, the rogue's idea of what is or is not permissible, that brings about conversations, interesting philosophical conundrums. And so all of the stuff that I studied in college when I thought I wanted to be a United Methodist minister and was studying theater as a means for social change, all of these things kind of it really helped me understand, I guess, that maybe this is what I was supposed to be doing all for a long time, is kind of playing in this space. So when my company decided to start creating 5e supplemental content, it was simple, like, oh, we'll do this book. And it's become far more than that, because I think the time the game requires to both understand and create content for sort of dictates a certain level of commitment. Anybody who's played a campaign past level like 11 knows that it's a time commitment. And I've played a lot of D&D in the past 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I've learned a lot. Like, you talk about the experiences that you have with the table, and you talk about like you've actually lived them, even though you haven't. And I think that in that way, games can be instructional, play can be illustrative. Like, it's just it's interesting in that way.
Do you feel like you're stepping when you play? And it sounds to me now, this is very similar. I grew up very similarly, so I didn't play as a kid. Stepped into it as an adult. That's really where, Jason and I were at when we even started this podcast. From your perspective, starting to play as someone who didn't play as a kid, starting new as like someone in their 30s or whatever the case is. I won't say 40s because,
I'm this close.
Okay, well, that's okay. We're
just this close to something else.
I'm on the cusp.
Yeah,
I'm on the cusp.
But how did you? What was your experience with this the first time? Who did you play with, and what was your what did your gut? What did your mind say?
So a friend of mine said we should play D&D. That would be fun. And I said, okay, you are correct. That would be fun. So some of my closest friends gathered together. I think we had 7 people, which I will say is too many people in an initial party. But there were 7 of us. We played a few sessions. The first session was fun. None of us knew what we were doing. And I felt like that was okay. And I was hooked. Like, just playing a few sessions, I was hooked. And I wanted to play more. I wanted to learn more about it. I wanted to, I get, obsessive isn't the right word, but I deep dive on stuff when I'm sparked by it. So, I'm in I'm on like the 3D6 subreddit trying to optimize my character sheets just to make sure that not only from a like a mechanical standpoint, I'm bringing an effective character to the table, but I'm also reading more fantasy to get a sense of like what archetype should I bring to the table if I'm really embracing the spirit of this game. And I started to recognize that, oh, like all of that stuff is superfluous. Like if what you're really trying to do is just have a good time, that time starts at the table with the individuals that you're playing with. And so there are some game shops in New York City that had weekly games that I would go and partake in. A lot of one shots, a lot of let's try to run the Waterdeep Dragon Heist campaign as a unit of strangers, and you just kind of throw in together and commit to doing it every week. I would say we did most of it. I don't know that we did all of it. But the more I played, the more I wanted to play. And then I started DMing because I recognized there's this kind of glut of players and not enough DMs. So I started trying to kind of navigate on that side. I found a gaming shop that was looking for DMs to host. So I agreed to brace myself, and I just immersed myself in as much of the material as I could and took a shot at it. I felt like I had enough confidence in my improv background to kind of fake my way through the character side of stuff. It was on the mechanical side as a player, because I didn't play as a kid, but you play with people who have been playing for 30 years and they have a real firm grasp of what the game is meant to be and what, how many dice you roll for a specific level of a specific spell. Like they just know all of that stuff kind of innately. And you don't want to look like an idiot in front of those types of people. So you kind of have to know your stuff. And that led me to, again, deep diving deeper and deeper and deeper into the game. And as I did that prep and as I kind of led sessions with people, I started to recognize pretty clearly where the holes were in the official released content. And in talks with the publisher at the company I work for, we kind of were kicking around ideas for D&D related material. And it was clear to both of us that a hole in the repertoire of officially released material are the kind of in between, the interstitial scenes where, well, this adventure starts in this town and then it's going to go to this town over here, but there's this whole journey in the woods that the DM guide only gives you like a roll table and maybe like some treants attack you, and that's really like all it tells you. And as a DM, you're like, I don't even know, like, what is a treant? What do they care about? Why would they attack a group of strangers on the woods? And you, in theory, if you're a creative person, you can write all that stuff. And if you have all the time in the world, you can weave all of these interconnected bits of backstory into that journey along the road. But I work 9 to 5. I have a wife I care about. I don't have all that time. I wish I did. And so I felt like it would be nice if there were a tool that would allow me to slot in fully realized spaces for encounters that were kind of a plug and play. So that was the premise for that first book that we created, the Game Master's Book of Random Encounters, and that's what it's meant to be. It's not always that for everybody, but that's the premise of that title.
Yeah, and I think that one and the NPC book that just came out, right? Should note both of those very much for sale. If you're listening, you should go buy them.
We'll tag them. We'll tag them on the podcast.
We'll link them all.
Tag them up.
Yep.
Oh yeah, and the Traps, Puzzles, Dungeons book. I mean, that's coming out. Pre-order that sucker. But I just think, man, Jeff, they certainly must accomplish. I have to assume they're going to accomplish what you set out for them to do. I mean, it's just what you're saying, that these are tools, really kind of tomes that counterintuitively expedite the mechanics and a little bit of the creativity and the thinking on their feet at the table, right? So that people can just be there together in community, explore, tell stories, riff off of one another. And maybe these books help take the edge off of the spontaneity when the DM just needs something fast, and boom, they can roll it up thanks to you. And I I gotta say, I mentioned this before we were recording. Personally, I appreciate that subtle sense of humor that I think is present throughout this. It's sometimes it's a little more in your face, sometimes it's just kind of implicit. I mean, Brad, I'll tell you, I really like that. I more and more I try to put humor in my own writing, and I think that you can do it in a way where it just like can manifest at the table and all these. I just think that's awesome.
Tone is important to me, and I think that there are certainly realms of play that are very hardcore, and when a dragon swoops down and takes your child and flies away to their horde, never to be seen again, there's a sense of drama to that, and perhaps not the time for a well-placed pun. And yet I'm just a gallows humor guy.
I'm thinking that's why I had 2 kids.
Yeah, and so for me, I think at the table, it's not real. Like, it is real. And
Right.
and it's hard, and when a PC dies, or when an NPC that you care about is placed in a position of peril, or they betray you, or whatever, like, all of those things elicit specific responses from players at the table. And humor is a part of that. Humor is a way that people deal with stress. And it's certainly how I handle things that are uncomfortable. It's just that's my nature. And I think that a lot of people wish they were funnier in the moment at the table. And so as a writer, I want to, again, consider it a tool. I want to offer what I think is funny, what I think is situationally humorous to people to take and present. It's an offer. It's an improv kind of tool. You just offer, and you let people pick up on stuff. And if they pick up on it and they run in a direction that leads to more hijinks and comedy and hilarity, that's great. That's a direction. If they don't say yes, and if they say no way, Jose, and they take it in a different direction, that's fine too. That's still an experience. I think jokes are often harder to create in the moment. And so anybody can say a dragon comes down and steals your kid. Like, I think that it's harder to kind of generate situational comedy stuff for DMs to use. So that was a choice that we made.
If other people can do that, you can listen to any one of Jason's lectures for school.
not recommended, but
so more of because you've gotten really rich with this, I'm going to actually ask a relatively bland question. And you were saying that the publisher, you were deciding to go into the 5e realm. What was the context or the story behind that versus going down like another game path, like a Pathfinder or something?
Yeah.
I think that just on the data side, if you just look at the raw numbers, the growth of 5e has been exponential. And you can point to a number of reasons why. The advent of streaming, Critical Role, obviously, huge numbers in terms of eyeballs, as well as monetary figures associated with their success. And so people watch those incredibly talented players and an incredibly talented DM use this game system in a way that looks fun as hell, and they want to replicate that experience at home. Impossible to do. But what's nice about the system is that even when you fall supremely short, you can still usually have a good time. I've heard it said that the only thing worse than no D&D is bad D&D. And that has also been my experience, because I've played in some really, really bad, just absolutely horrible sessions that took all the fun out of anything you could imagine the game being in terms of an escape from reality. But the system we recognized was growing in popularity, and we just felt like that was the one we wanted to kind of hook onto, and it was the only one that I played. So
that's awesome too.
That'll do it too.
Yeah. I played a little dungeon world, which I enjoyed. I felt like there was a real I enjoyed the anything can happen kind of sense of chaos that came with that dice system. I love the premise of like this semi succeeds, but there's a caveat to it, which I don't, D&D 5e is a little more binary. You either hit the AC or you don't. There's no like, well, I mean, you killed that guy, but the arrow went right through him and shot your ally. Like that's not really built into the system. You can still say that happens, but it's not germane to the rule set.
Jason's used to me going DM prerogative to just because you have to add that. It makes it more interesting.
I use the phrase a lot, at GM discretion. I use that phrase throughout all of the stuff that I've written so far, because there's stuff that you just need to kind of say, actually, no, this is what happens. If you want those large narratively sweeping moments or campaigns, I think you do need to execute the role of showrunner a little bit and sort of say, I know what I have planned for you. And while I don't want to railroad you, but at the same time, I think that this story can go a different direction that'll be more, it'll have a large, more grand payoff than, congratulations, you've solved my mystery by rolling a natural 20. Like, it's just not the same.
No.
We can get into dice. We talk a lot, or we have talked a lot about dice mechanic.
Because it's just fun.
Yeah, it's fun, and we're nerds. So, and even dice mechanics for games that we haven't really played. What was the? I feel like I'm a news reporter, and I'm just asking some questions that came up in my head as you were talking. So obviously, you just decided, okay, I'm gonna, more players than DMs. I'm gonna go the DM path. You kind of said you jumped into Reddit, you jumped anywhere else. What was can you think of anything that really was like the light bulb moment, a resource or a tool or something that, it may have just been a thought that was the light bulb that triggered it off,
Well, in terms of playing the game, I think the first session I played, the freedom that a simple spell like minor illusion gives you, if you're creative, you can bend the world a little bit if you just have the right offers, because those offers then force the person running the game to say like, okay, well, now I have to respond to this illusion that you just made. We're held up by bandits. I use minor illusion to make it look like the bandit leader pissed his pants. Okay, now what? Now what do we do? Well, now all the leader is looking embarrassed. So the DM has to respond to that. Just that simple spark of stupidity at a table. You can't do that in Monopoly. You can't do that in Settlers of Catan. Like I like games. I love gaming. I play a ton of video games. You can't do that in Fallout. You can't do that in God of War. Like there's a even in the most open world of games, there's a strict kind of pretense on what you're actually able to do as a player. But at a role-playing table, you can suggest it and see what happens.
Yeah.
So that for me was, I mean, it's just fun. Like how is that not enjoyable? Why wouldn't I want more of that? Why wouldn't I want to pursue that freedom? On the writing side, I think probably DMing for the first time and having, you're establishing a scene and you're like, I've got this all down. I've got my narrative text down. I'm going to paint a picture for these people. And I tend to DM probably too narratively. I probably have too much descriptive text. I'm more of a screenwriter, right? Like I establish a space, I then lead you into it, and I ramble, as is evidenced by this interview. So I'm talking and I'm presenting a space, and I just add and there's some peasants in the corner and their faces are muddy. I would go talk to the peasants.
Yep.
Why would you talk to them? They're just
Yep.
They're scenery. They're not real. They're not real people. And now it's like, well, shit, now I've just said the commoners of this kingdom that I've created aren't real people. Who am I? What have I become? I'm a portrait of a white male privilege. And so then you have to improvise. Who are these commoners? What political system are they living on?
Awesome.
Why are they common? Because my players are asking these sorts of, they're not asking what's the government like here, but they would want to know if the conversation starts to go that direction. And I'm not a scattershot, whole hog, disorganized person, but organization is not my strong suit. And so one of the things that became incredibly apparent to me very fast is that I have to personally take much better notes at the table because my players are taking notes. And if they're like, no, we talked to Rodney in session 3, and he said that, Sir David is the worst person in the company. I'm like, oh yeah, Sir David, I remember him. That guy I made up off the top of my head that afternoon.
Right.
You just have to, it's one of the things that's marvelous about some of these professional DMs. Like they've created these worlds. They remember all of that stuff. They've got a Rolodex of characters. And that was one of the springboards for the NPC book was, okay, you want to go talk to those commoners? Those commoners are Jake Filibuster and Nanny Fat Sacks. Those are their names. Congratulations, you've met them. Okay, but then they start asking deeper, more probing questions about these people, and it's like, well, what do they care about? I've placed them here to give you directions. That's the only reason I've included them. But as a player, I've become obsessed with NPCs because the DM had a fun voice. The DM just as a rib, just to mess with the DM. Like I thought it was fun. And it's all part of playing at the table. I've developed full-blown campaign arcs around people that I put in as a one-off, but that my party latched onto, just glommed onto them completely. And that's the evolution of storytelling that you create together, in my opinion, is that the things that they start to care about need to be the things that you start to care about. And you kind of, right turn your whole campaign. But creating that stuff on the fly is, again, difficult. Mm-hmm. And so we wanted to create a resource that had specific wants and needs, some secrets and obstacles, and maybe a little bit of extra stuff on the side, as well as like every every DM I've ever talked to, can I loot the body? 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 Can I loot their body? What do they have in their pocket? Can I pick his pocket? And it's like, he has nothing. They have nothing. None of these people carry anything. But you don't want the rogue in your party to feel bad because they keep picking pockets. You don't want them to stop just because everybody's broke, because you refuse to give any of these people anything interesting. And so we started adding, for all of these profiles that we created in the NPC book, like, yes, specifically, what do they have on their person? Stuff. Some of them have stuff. Most of them have boring stuff and the occasional thing of interest. But it's only interesting if you as a DM decide, yes, that locket that they're carrying actually is a magical item and it has these properties in it, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, because this Baron Delacroix carp, the blowfish. Jason hasn't seen this yet, and you just brought it up. He's carrying 40 silver, 34 gold, and a scrap of paper listing losers with pretty wives.
Yeah.
Love it. Okay, so that's a perfect cap to what I think was just a beautiful ramble, if you will, because I mean, we're there with you big time.
That's what they are.
They as well they should be. You've been really indulgent with your time, so just one more question, if we might.
Sure.
When you look at the books, right? When you look at your random encounters and your non-player characters books, right, for sale right now, really cool. And Traps, Puzzles, and Dungeons, right? Pre-order that sucker. I mean, they're so cool. And I obviously, Brad and I know what we're enamored with about these books, but as the author, what are you, and it's okay, I think, to have a little ego here. What are you, what are you most proud of when you look at this collection that you've created?
Again, I was raised in the church and taught very, very early on to embrace humility. So it's hard for me to just like say like, these things are the best and here's why.
Well, what makes you happiest about these?
Yeah, I think for me, I spent a lot of time considering how to make every page useful. And I think that goal was achieved and then some. Like, I think every page has plenty of detail. As a writer, at least that aspect of my personality, the good stuff is in the specificity. That's where those are the things that linger. The pictures that you're able to paint through just one added phrase that has a bit more granular detail. The problem with writing for this particular genre is that it still has to be general and has to be meaningfully universal for any table at any time. And so trying to balance the specificity necessary to bring a character to life or to illuminate a space in a way that makes it memorable, while also making it vague enough to allow for GMs to add their own color to it. That was kind of the needle that I tried to thread the majority of the time while I was creating stuff. And I would like to think that in that way, I succeeded. I think that some people may approach the material and say, there's too much specificity here. And other people might approach it and say, this is too general. I wanted more specificity. And so for me, I hear both of those criticisms, but I don't care. I know what I was trying to do, which was kind of be in that middle space, to draw the outlines, but leave the coloring of the costumes to the person who's narrating the story. to write 500 characters and try to write them without judgment, to just try to present them as modules that I don't know what will happen if you put this NPC who follows monsters around specifically to observe their sex lives. I don't know what will happen when you put him into your campaign. I don't know. I only know that he exists as a creature, as a individual, and he may immediately be stabbed. He may immediately become your party's mascot. I don't know. I don't care. I just wanted to give you that individual. And my hope is that every page has something that sparks a new, like, the books are not the end, they're the beginning, right?
Yeah,
they're meant
excellent.
for you to take them and run with them. So I think they succeed in that way. And I hope that other people agree. But if they don't, I can't help you. I don't know what to do. Text me, email me, find me on Twitter, drag me as far as you possibly can.
That's awesome.
Two things, and we'll wrap up. One, yes, Jason, based off of what he just said, I will rewrite my PC now.
What choice do you have?
I can't believe he wrote an NPC just like my PC.
Awkward.
And two, I'm going to put you on the spot. Here's the gotcha question, and that is, will you agree to come back on with us when the new book is out, or even before that, just how it's progressing? And because this has been a fascinating discussion. I think it's just, I would love to continue this again at some point. So there's the gotcha.
Two-parter? You want to make it a two-parter? A five-parter?
Yeah, or let's just say multi-parter. We'll have you back to discuss A, the new book, B, how gaming has been, C, etc., or miscellaneous.
Well, I will say the NPC book's very new, so I hope that it has an interesting shelf life, and that I'm interested to see what it looks like in the wild, right? Like the game, the first book, we had no idea how it would do. It's been relatively successful, obviously successful enough to greenlight a few others. So we kind of have a sense of how that one's done. I don't know how the NPC book's going to do. I know we have pre-orders in for the Traps book, so I know that one's also going to go to market. So yeah, I'd love to come back. We'll chat through everything. But I'm interested to see how this one does and how it's received. Your audience will hopefully be a part of that. So
yes, definitely.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on. And again,
so much.
I find the material fascinating just because we're behind you a little bit in terms of where we are coming into the gaming. So where you were some time ago, where you started playing again, that's where we have been. So that book, the first book, hit the sweet spot for me as someone DMing with training wheels. This NPC book, like I said, I just got it, I think on Monday or Tuesday. And I already looked in, like the Delacroix, that already hooked me. So I would have to change.
No pun intended.
Yeah, I would have to change. I'll have to adjust the name a little bit because I'm going to find a way to incorporate him into our game. But thank you so much for spending time with us. Thank you for writing this material. Because there are a lot of us out there, I think a lot that are going to enjoy these. We will put links to these out there and for people to pick up. Well worth it,
Oh man.
To be honest with you, I think I mentioned to you, Jace, I think, it's cheaper to pick up one of these and there's more material in it than there is in a lot of other books that are, narrow. Yeah. So
they're priced to move.
Yeah.
And clearly. Yeah. And we out here, thank you all for that fact.
Times are hard all over. So yeah, it's you gotta buy another 40 different dice sets to just have, because you never know when you're gonna need your orange dice or your neon green ones. So it's just good to have those. Cheaper than 2 sets of dice are books. So
Yeah.
Or the bag, the Amazon bag of 100 dice.
I can't now. We can't compete with that. We can't compete.
No,
with
no,
that.
nor should you. Not the point.
Don't even try.
No, yeah.
Don't even try.
Jeff, this has been a true delight. Seriously,
Oh,
this is
well, thank
just
you.
wonderful. Thank you so much for doing this. We will look forward to having you back, and obviously we'll be in touch in the interim. Maybe around the time that then Traps and Puzzles is out or coming out.
Well, we need to check to make sure he's still alive at that point.
Check in with me right after the holidays. I tend to go into kind of a bit of a humbug situation, and I may not recover after the holidays. So
okay, well, we'll help you out.
We'll see. Yeah, we'll be shipping in January, I think, for a May on sale. So
okay,
yeah,
wow.
it'll be busy.
All right. Well, good luck with everything. A huge thanks, and man, keep up the beautiful work because it really is.
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it, and continue doing what you're doing. Obviously, this is a passion that you guys care about, and I'm always inspired by people who care for something enough to share their opinions about it with other people in a forum like this. So keep it up.
Thanks very much. We will.
Yeah.
All right. Be well.
Yeah. You too. Bye.
All right, Brad. Wow. Let's walk over to the GM corner and process that for a moment.
Yeah. So I'm going to have to take some time to process just because that was absolutely fascinating. But I'll give you just a couple brief impressions. Is one, the way Jeff talked about the books, I don't think he even did them. Sorry, Jeff. I don't think you did them justice. When you were talking about just the NPC book itself. Now, like I said in the interview, I haven't had time to go through it all yet, but talking about that idea that here are some random serfs, and what if they want to go talk to them? What do you do? The level of detail.
Just what a lovely, creative, humble guy.
Oh, yeah. Oh yeah, we're going to have to have him back before the next book goes, or at some point toward the end of the year, early next year.
And to demonstrate his poor judgment, he's willing to come back in the future.
Yes, yeah. I think. Well, let's just be honest. I put him on the spot in the recording.
Well, that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
Okay. What's for since we're in the corner here?
Yeah.
What's one takeaway from our interview with Jeff Ashworth that sticks with you right now? What's floating around for you? One takeaway.
The level of detail that he looks at things as a DM or as a player.
Yeah.
And we both have the ability to do that. We both haven't had time to do, let me rephrase that. We both have the ability to do it. I haven't had time.
No, we haven't had time.
Because we get so busy recording these, we don't play as much.
Also, those jobs and families really get in the way, right?
Although we'll talk about this in a future episode. We're trying some different vehicles to.
Yeah, that's going to be an episode. Yeah.
Yeah, to continue play. So, what about you? What was a takeaway for you?
I mean, there's so much there, like you said, but I will say one thing really grabbed me, and it's kind of more than the rest, and it's kind of funny because it's so much more apropos to the mindset of Star Wars, Star Trek, etc., sci-fi in general, than D&D perhaps. But Jeff's comment that being a GM is like being a showrunner, that clicked for me. Like I mean it. I will go to bed tonight thinking about that, because that reframe, I think, is almost exactly what I seek to achieve when I'm GMing. And like you and I have talked a lot about show running with the books that have come out, the oral histories on these different sci-fi franchises, and all the interviews with showrunners. And I'll just stop there. That one, more than any single thing, just hooked me.
We know that during the pandemic, Jeff, I think, said this in as well. The pandemic, in effect, 2020, jacked up gaming, and it jacked up gaming online, Zoom, Roll20, whatever the case may be. but he didn't start playing as a kid.
Yeah,
And
interesting.
neither did we from a D&D perspective.
Oh, no,
You know,
no.
I played a little bit of the red box basic game, but not what was then advanced.
Right,
D&D.
right.
So, and look at truly a creative. I'm still processing.
So cool.
Truly a creative. So, Chase, what are you going to read this week?
I don't know.
Okay.
I have a feeling I know what I'm going to be ordering and pre-ordering. And we really mean it, by the way, everyone. Brad and I really mean it when we say, please take a look at ordering and pre-ordering Jeff Ashworth's books. They are so worth the money. And especially now that we've all had a chance, if you will, to meet the author, why wouldn't you want to give back and support his writing with that level of creativity? So I know what I'll be ordering. I'm not entirely sure what I'll be reading yet, in part because even Amazon's only so fast.
I will say this, and then we can wrap up. Just so we're clear, the first book is what had us reach out to him.
Yes.
The book itself was so fascinating to us, even before we had the initial conversations with Jeff about joining us. So we're buying the books themselves. There's, the material was fascinating enough that even if it weren't in our show, it would have been a fascinating conversation just to have an email one or just get on Zoom.
And what our listeners don't know is that we finally had to cut it off. We talked for 15 minutes before we recorded and went almost another 20 afterwards. Yeah. Just in the same conversation. It just tells you the kind of guy.
I think Jeff probably got sick. Jeff, you probably got sick of us by the end of that. So sorry if we ran you long.
Jeff Ashworth, again, thank you very much for a wonderful interview that's going to have all of us really reassessing and growing our GMing. And, I think for players too, like he said, turning it over in the sense of giving, creating that context, again, show running, creating the episode, if you will, in which they can choose their adventure.
He said the players generate enough content. That just the players can generate enough content to make to make it easier on the DM. Just based talking. So well done. Thank you, sir.
All right, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us. We know it's a bit longer of an episode, but man, talk about well worth the invested time. As always, thanks for listening. Please check us out on all of our presences on the interwebs, Facebook and Instagram. And obviously you can find Dice in Mind, undoubtedly your favorite podcast. Look, it's more fun than the news. You find us on all of the places where you get your podcasts. And please do email us. You can find it all in the show notes. As always, be well, stay well. We will talk with you next week.